Cool. Yay.
Wow. We good? You going?
Yeah, go for it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Well, to the couple of people here and to anybody watching the recording, welcome to our workshop. This is the first session of the Graduate Writing Symposium for this year, this academic year. And today we're going to be talking about tips for crafting a strong abstract. My name is Spencer Young, and we have Jason Cahoon right over here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason. I am, along with Spencer, one of the graduate writing consultants at the Writing Center, as well as writing consultants. We are both in the MFA Creative Writing Program. I'm in my second year in the program, and Spencer is in their third year in the program.
That is correct. Yeah. So important note before we get started today. Today's workshop is going to offer, a really broad overview of abstract writing. We've designed it to be as applicable as possible to the widest range of graduate student writers, but we will not be able to cover everything. So if you have a specific question that we don't answer today, you can feel free, let me actually go to the next slide, there we go, to make an appointment at the URL on the screen there, or send either Jason or I an email, and we'd be happy to make an appointment for you, or you can make an appointment yourself and meet with us at any time during the semester. So let's dive in. So the abstract is one of the most important parts of any scientific article, because it is the piece of your writing that most everyone who comes across your work is going to read. So in one of the sources that we've relied on to build this presentation, which is Scientific Writing and Communication by Angelica H. Hoffman, Hoffman frames the importance of the abstract really well. And she writes, "Most people, including editors and reviewers, will read your article only if your abstract interests them. The abstract is often also the only part of the paper, together with the title, that can be retrieved through a database search. And so it is therefore essential that the abstract interest your reader." And so the abstract then, really needs to be successful, if you want your intended audience to actually read the rest of your paper. So today, we're going to go ahead and provide an overview of the following topics. So first, we're going to talk about the purpose of an abstract. Then we will talk about a couple different processes for writing an abstract. And then we'll talk about a few different types of abstracts and some style considerations and emphases that you should consider as you draft your abstract. And then after we're done with all that, if anyone is interested, we'll walk through an activity that will hopefully get those of you that are here started on an abstract, whether that's for your thesis or your dissertation or an article that you're aiming to publish. So you walk away or log off of Zoom from this workshop with something to go. So yeah. Okay. So as I already mentioned, the abstract is important because its job is to introduce your audience to your paper and ideally convince them to read further. And so because of this, it's really important to understand the two main aspects about the purpose of the abstract before you begin writing. And those two things are, number one, the audience of the abstract, and number two, the organization of the abstract. So the very first thing to consider about your abstract is the audience. Who is going to read this abstract? And depending on your writing project, that could be a lot of different people, right? They might be journal editors or reviewers or a general readership of that journal. They could be conference peer reviewers, selection committees, or attendees at a conference. They could be international readers or national readers, non-professionals in your field or professionals in your field, and then of course, inexperienced researchers or very experienced researchers. And so you can kind of get the sense, right, that because the audience can change depending on the context of your article, you're going to need to consider the assumptions that different audiences have about your work. And remember to think about the accessibility of your research. So, for example, does your abstract effectively communicate to an international audience? And how do you know that it does? And secondly, because the abstract is usually available through a database search, your audience of your abstract is most likely going to be a broader audience than those who you know will read the full article, right? And so because of this, Hoffman actually recommends that you write the abstract with the non-specialist in mind. And that doesn't mean that you can't use field-specific terminology, but because your abstract is broad, you want to make sure that anyone in your audience can understand what you discuss in your article without actually having to read the entire article itself. So that is what we have for thinking about audience. Let's move on to that second purpose, which is the organization of the abstract. So again, once you've considered the audience of your abstract, you should also consider the overall organization. So how should you structure or start your abstract? How many words should you devote to discussing the research questions, the literature review, the methodology, the results, the discussion, right? Those main aspects of a scientific paper. And how should you end your abstract? So every abstract is different, right? But there are a few general guidelines that we think will be really helpful. So Hoffman says that the abstract should fully summarize the contents of the paper in one paragraph, and that the abstract should be concise, informative, and complete. So you shouldn't try to include every finding and every detail in your abstract, right? Instead, you want to include all of the most important details of the paper in as few of words as possible. And in this way, you might think of the abstract as like the highlight reel of each section of your paper. And because of this, even though the abstract is the first thing that your audience is going to read from your article, it is easiest to write the abstract after the manuscript is complete. So with our audience and our organization in mind, let's move to thinking about the process of writing an abstract. So depending on the type of article you are writing an abstract for, or even the type of writing project in general, your writing process is going to differ. So Jason, in a few minutes, is going to discuss some different types and characteristics of the abstract. But before I hand it over to him, I want to go ahead and offer a general writing process for the abstract. And I'll offer actually two different kinds, so you have some options to pick from. Hoffman offers a really succinct breakdown of what needs to go in an abstract and how long you should spend on each element. Importantly, she writes, although the abstract is a mini version of the writing project, following its general organization, the abstract does not give equal weight to each aspect or each part of the paper. So Hoffman's breakdown is actually as follows. So first, she says that the abstract may include a sentence or two of background information from the introduction, right? And in these first two sentences, these sentences should include the overall question or purpose of the writing project from the introduction. Second, the abstract typically describes the experimental approach, but really only generally, not really super in depth. And it usually only includes the main results from the results section of the project. Third, the abstract also contains the answer to the research question and purpose, which is usually found in your discussion section. And you do need to include the answer to your project, right? You do have to spoil your research outcomes. You can't save that for somebody to read the paper, unfortunately. And finally, the abstract should end with a sentence that states an implication, a speculation, or maybe a recommendation based on the research question or purpose. And so if you're tracking, right, altogether, the abstract may be at most 5 sentences in length, right? You got 1 to 2 sentences of background and research and the research question or purpose. You got 1 sentence that describes the experimental approach, 1 sentence that answers the research question and shares the main results, and then a final sentence that states the implications for the essay, for the study. And that's it. So that is one perspective about how to write an abstract. And let me show another one. So Danica and Sims offers a slightly different approach for the abstract writing process. Sims frames the process of writing an abstract as an art in succinct and compelling scientific storytelling. So if we think of the abstract as a succinct story of our writing project, it might help us view the writing process in a new way. Sims writes that the concise nature of an abstract emphasizes these challenges of scientific storytelling. How can we apply principles for effective written communication in a concentrated and compact form without losing comprehension? And so, as a solution, Sims built a table that guides readers through multiple stages of abstract writing. And I figured, since we probably have a number of scientists watching this or in Zoom right now, who are used to probably looking at tables, I thought it might be an effective way to discuss the process of abstract writing. As you can see, Sims identifies 6 different stages of the abstract writing process: before, introduction, methodology, results, discussion and conclusion, and then after. And then after breaking down the abstract into these stages, Sims offers both reflective questions and practical considerations for each stage of the writing process. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through each stage, but we are happy to share this presentation with anyone who's interested. And of course, it will be also recorded for people to take a look at later. The last resource that I want to share is a quick overview of the APA guidelines for abstract writing. This comes directly from APA's website. And as you can see, the overview offers a really quick and clean look at what the typical expectations will be for journals and publications that follow the APA style guidelines. So a few things of note. First, the APA says to limit your abstract to 250 words. And in that small print below, underneath at the bottom of the graphic there, that you may not be able to read, they clarify that this rule should be followed unless otherwise requested. So that said, most academic journals do tend to limit abstract submissions to no more than 250 words. Also, just like Hoffman indicates, APA suggests that you should write only 1 to 2 sentences per topic. And the APA also offers really clear and succinct information of specifically what to include in the methodology of the study. They say brief descriptions of the study design, the sample, and the sample size. That's it. So all other methodological information does not need to be in your abstract. Leave that for the paper. And last, but certainly not least, the right column includes really specific formatting criteria that may be helpful when you're ready to submit your abstract to your journal of choice. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Jason, who will be discussing some different kinds of abstracts that some journals may be looking for.
Are you going to share your screen or are you going to work on that screen?
Can I just go in front of yours?
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, everybody. Jason here again to keep this train rolling. Okay, so in many cases, Hoffman's model is a great resource for crafting abstracts that meet your audience's expectations. Though Hoffman's model aligns with many of the conventions for abstract writing, there is more than one way to write an abstract. In the next segment of this workshop, we're going to look at a different model for abstract writing that we pulled from the Carnegie Mellon Student Academic Success Center. You can find a paper or digital copy of this resource among the handouts that we distributed. I actually just put a link in the chat for anyone that wants to check out that link, and we'll link that in the slides as well. So in the handout, you can see examples of the model with an annotated breakdown of the steps. So in the CMU model, demonstrating and positioning the novelty of one's research is one of the key rhetorical outcomes. With that in mind, let's take a look at the 4 steps. So in the CMU model, the first move is to explain the significance of your work. This step communicates why someone should care about your work. In the opening sentences, it is effective to write toward a broader audience that is interested to know why this work is important. The second move is to describe the status quo, or state of affairs regarding the current scholarship related to your research. This can include the practices in your field, as well as the most important knowledge that is foundational to your research. The third move is to identify a gap in the research. This step communicates how the current practices or state of affairs related to your research is incomplete, unsatisfactory, or inconclusive. This step also shows why this gap needs to be filled. The fourth and final step is to fill that gap with your research. You want to make it clear how your research can contribute to filling the gap that you identify. Your research can do this by proposing a new theory or hypothesis, offering a new solution to a problem, proposing a new methodology, or offering new domains for your research. These can include an unstudied population, a new site, new material, or any other unexplored phenomena. And so if we put this, or I'm gonna pull up Hoffman's model, and so we can kind of look at these two side by side. So like Hoffman's model for writing abstracts, the CMU model deconstructs the abstract into 4 steps. One of the main differences is that the CMU model recommends placing the significance of the research at the beginning of the abstract, whereas Hoffman's model reserves commentary on the work's implications for the end. This model also places more emphasis on identifying gaps in the status quo and relating one's research to the gaps that one identifies. In contrast, Hoffman's model places more emphasis on the research itself and its results. I argue that neither of these models are inherently better than the other. Discerning which of these models works best for you will depend on the structure of your manuscript and your audience expectations. We recommend taking the time to check the guidelines of the source that you are submitting to and to survey some of the recent work that is relevant to your research before choosing a model to construct your abstract. Okay, so classifying abstracts can be a useful way to help determine the audience expectations for one's abstract. Today, we're going to focus on 2 ways of classifying abstracts and their expectations. As stated earlier, the first step is to always check the submission guidelines to see what expectations are explicitly communicated. Still, the guidelines for an abstract aren't always as specific as one may hope. In these cases, it is worthwhile to look at recent publications from the source that you're submitting to and to classify the abstracts of those publications. First, we will distinguish between descriptive abstracts and informative abstracts. Second, we will discuss the differences between structured, semi-structured, and non-structured abstracts. There are certain attributes that one can expect to find in each of these forms. These classifications are most relevant to those whose manuscript follows the IMRAD structure of introduction, methods, result, and discussion to communicate their research. Okay. When one discerns between descriptive and informative abstracts, there are three attributes that one can look for. These attributes include, first, the relationship between the abstract and the contents of the article. Second, the key parts that structure the abstract. And third, the length of the abstract. First, we'll discuss the relationship between the abstract and the contents of the article. Descriptive abstracts and informative abstracts have slightly different relationships to the manuscript. A descriptive abstract informs the audience about the contents of the article. It describes the purpose, methods, and scope of the research, but it does not communicate its results, conclusions, or make judgments about its implications. By contrast, informative abstracts communicate all of the essential elements of the longer work, including the results and the conclusions drawn from the research. These are the types of abstracts where one does want to spoil the research, as Spencer mentioned earlier. Okay, second, we'll discuss the key parts of an abstract to discern between informative and descriptive abstracts. Since descriptive and informative abstracts have different key parts, they have slightly different structures. A descriptive abstract can be deconstructed into 3 or 4 sections. First, one touches upon the necessary background information on the research. Second, its purpose. Third, the focus, and in some cases, 4, an overview of its contents. Though in the case of a descriptive abstract, this overview will be synthesized and not directly report the results. An informative abstract, by contrast, reflects the structure of the longer work. For STEM publications, the structure will often follow the IMRAD structure. Okay, and thirdly, one can discern between informative and descriptive abstracts by the length and expectations for that length. For a descriptive abstract, the length tends to be pretty short, usually less than 100 words. Whereas for an informative abstract, the length expectations tend to be longer, usually closer to the 250 word limit that Spencer mentioned earlier. Okay, so moving on past informative versus descriptive abstracts, we're going to take a look at classifying structured, semi-structured, and non-structured abstracts. So one can classify an abstract as structured, semi-structured, or non-structured by a number of different qualities. Structured abstracts are most commonly found in medical and clinical journals, but they can also be found more broadly in the sciences. A structured abstract is one that dedicates a paragraph to each of the IMRAD parts of their work. Structured abstracts use headings for each of its settings and are usually longer than other forms. A semi-structured abstract is one that dedicates a sentence to each of the IMRAD sections, much like Hoffman's model. Like a structured abstract, it reflects the structure of the research, but semi-structured abstracts don't use headings and are usually only a paragraph long. Lastly, non-structured abstracts are any that don't follow the IMRAD structure, or ones that don't relay the findings and conclusions drawn from the research, much like a descriptive abstract. Well, descriptive abstracts are non-structured abstracts, I should clarify. So here's a classification tree that can help you classify an abstract. An effective practice is to first determine whether you are expected to write an informative or descriptive abstract, then to determine which structural expectations your publishers have for your abstract. For those whose research does not follow the IMRAD structure, this classification process may not be as necessary as those who are communicating research that follows the IMRAD structure. Okay, so since abstracts are both rhetorical and a distillation of the manuscript, it is essential to consider the emphases of one's abstract. Common attributes of a manuscript that are worth emphasizing in the abstract include the relevance of one's work, the stakes involved in one's research, the research or practices that are most important to understanding those of the manuscript, the results, and conclusions that are drawn from the results. There may be missed opportunities if one or more of these emphases aren't made. Phelan and Halpern describe an ineffective abstract as, quote, the abstract that announces the topics the essay examines without revealing the conclusions that have been drawn from this activity or how those conclusions bear on a larger scholarly conversation. This kind of abstract mistakenly privileges the what, those topics, over the so what, those conclusions and why they matter, end quote. In many cases, effectively communicating the so what of your research increases the likelihood that your abstract makes a strong first impression upon your reader. Additionally, abstracts should not include any information that is not included in the manuscript, even when describing the background and significance of the work. There are also some important stylistic choices that one can make to satisfy the expectations of their audience. Typically, abstracts exclude direct references to other research, though in rare circumstances, exceptions are made to describe novel or pivotal research. Strong abstracts include the key terms that are used in the manuscript. This will help inform the audience expectations, in addition to making your research visible when those words are typed into search engines. Although it is useful to include key terms, one should avoid using jargon. As Spencer mentioned earlier, one should try to make their abstracts communicable to a broad audience. One exception to the jargon rule is using novel terms that the research proposes. A few other stylistic choices include avoiding any abbreviations that aren't included in a journal or publisher's guidelines for accepted abbreviations. Lastly, one should try to avoid spin in composing one's abstract. In their study on the prevalence and classification of spin, Lazares and other authors define spin as, quote, the use of specific reporting strategies, either intentional or unintentional, to convince the reader that the beneficial effect of the experimental treatment in terms of efficacy and safety is higher than is actually shown by the data, end quote. Though it can be important to describe the significance or implications of one's work, it is imperative that conclusions and implications are grounded by the research so as to uphold the credibility of both the abstract and the manuscript. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a more generative activity to kind of get some ideas onto the page. And so we're going to kind of break this into kind of this activity portion into two steps. First, we're going to get some ideas onto the page. And then second, Spencer is going to run you through an activity that can help you maybe think about how you're going to apply these ideas to a model for an abstract. So to start, we're going to ask you to free write into 4 prompts that we've prepared for you. These prompts include the following questions. First, what is the central issue or question or problem driving your inquiry? Second, what is your answer to this question or problem? Third, what steps does your article take to get to this answer? And fourth, How does your article contribute to an existing scholarly conversation? In approaching this exercise, we are going to encourage you to maybe think about some research that is either in process or maybe forthcoming in your current research practices. So I think to start, we'll use maybe about 10 minutes or so, and to write into these prompting questions, and then we'll talk about how we can apply these to an abstract structure.
Sorry, are we gonna try to?
Do you want to do it? I mean, we do have like a follow-up to this, so I don't know
Yeah, we have three people in here. I don't know if we want to.
Could pause the recording, let people write, and
Yeah.
then be like, all right, we're back.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I kind of want to do the exercise. If you're in the negative.
For sure, we can totally pause the recording, and so we're not all sitting here inside.
Okay.
Share my screen. We can.
Sorry. Okay.
That is okay. All right. That was about 10 minutes with these specific questions. Hopefully, you all were able to generate some start to what might become an abstract for your current project. I want to lead us through one more just small annotation activity that maybe will purposefully is built off of the questions that you just answered. So remember, we're thinking a lot about like the organization and the process of writing an abstract and what that looks like. And so I thought it might be helpful for us to do a short annotation activity just to look at your answers to those 4 questions that were on the previous slide and thinking about how they fit into the process of the abstract that you will eventually write for your essay or write for your writing project. So what I have up on screen here are again, Hoffman's 4 elements to an abstract. And what I thought would be helpful for us to do is just to annotate our free writing responses with Hoffman's 4 elements of an abstract in mind. So what you might want to do is like have 4 different colors, pens or highlighters, or maybe you want to like circle something and underline something, have a little key that tells you what is what, but some sort of annotative practice that helps you identify how each of these parts of your abstract are fitting together. So first and foremost, we have the background information and the overall question or the purpose of the study. That's how Hoffman says that you should start your abstract. Go ahead, I'll give you like 30 seconds. Look through your answers to those previous questions and see if you can identify where you are specifically talking about background information that your audience needs to know, and where you identify the overall question or the purpose of the study that you are writing. Okay. Hopefully you've identified some things and you've annotated them. Let's move on to the second element of Hoffman's abstract. So the experimental approach and the main results of the study, right? This is where you might talk about your methodology and also the results section. Where are you identifying your methodology and where are you talking about the main results of your study? How long are you talking about these things? Remember, Hoffman says that we should only really have one sentence that talks about our methodology and our main results. Are you writing about that too much? Do you need to revise and condense, or do you need to expand maybe? So go ahead and annotate where you're seeing the experimental approach and the main results in your answers. Okay. Third element of Hoffman's abstract, she says that we need to have about one sentence that answers the research question or the purpose. This is kind of correlating with the discussion section of a traditional scientific paper, right? So where are you writing the answer or sharing the answer to your research question or purpose? And can you fit that into one sentence? Go ahead and annotate where you're seeing that in your answers. Okay, and the last element to Hoffman's abstract, she says that we should end the abstract with an implication, a speculation, or a recommendation based on that answer to the question or the purpose of the study. So do your answers do that? How do they connect to the larger scholastic conversation surrounding your topic of study? Go ahead and identify where you're talking about those implications in your answers. Okay. Hopefully, you have some free writing on a piece of paper or on a Word doc, and you got some scribbles or you got some highlights, you got some notes that will help you as you move forward. Before we wrap up and take any questions, just two important questions that you should ask yourself based on this activity. First, is there any necessary information missing from this draft of your abstract, right? Doing this annotation activity and answering those questions, are you noticing any like holes in what you need to be including in your abstract that you maybe don't know how to write, at least right now, or that you know how to write, but you just, and for some reason, forgot to include? So that's the first thing that I would say. Identify what necessary information is missing from your draft. Second, following Hoffman's structures, how can you connect each of these elements together, right? So it's one thing just to have these 4 different elements of an abstract all together, maybe in some scribbled notes or bullet points. It's another thing to put them together into a cohesive paragraph. Do you have an idea about how you are going to link each of these different aspects of the abstract together? Or does that feel too hard or too a step too far in the process? If it is something that you are struggling with thinking about how to synthesize and connect all of these ideas together, that is what Jason and I can absolutely help you with in the Writing Center. We're happy to come and take a look at your notes, and together we can sit down and write that abstract. But that is all we have prepared for you all today. I do want to open it up in the last 10 or so minutes if people have questions, specific questions or broad questions, whatever, about abstracts or the Writing Center. We're happy to answer them. Otherwise, we'll wrap up a little early.
Before you like stop sharing your screen, I don't know if this would work, but obviously if people have questions, they should ask them. But do you think you'd be able to show how to schedule an appointment at the Writing Center briefly, like before we log off? Because I think some people don't know how to do that, and it can be a little confusing.
Yes. I do wonder because
so you have to like log in.
Yeah, and it looks different on our end.
Right.
Use a student login if you want me to use it.
Do you want to use a student login? Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Come around the table.
If that is helpful, we can definitely share.
I do have, I mean, again, if somebody online has a question, feel free to put it in the chat and we can say it out loud. But I do have a question. When I think about abstract, sometimes like my brain always goes to like the purpose of the study in the first sentence. But some of those really emphasize like talking about part of your lit review in the first sentence. And so my brain often struggles to be like, how do I summarize a whole lit review, which might be pretty long, into like a first sentence? Like, do you have any thoughts on like the philosophy of that? like how to make those decisions about what goes in there if you're doing it before your purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first question, like to specify, like, are you thinking about literature review, like at like the dissertation level, like thesis level, like that's what you're generally kind
at
of
this
thinking
point
about?
I am, but even for like a research paper, I mean, like a journal article, maybe the thing there that makes sense to me is looking at like what the missing piece is. So you talk about the puzzle and how your study is the missing piece, but you've got to really briefly talk about that body of research.
Yeah, it seems almost like there's just too much information to include. Yeah. I mean, Jason, I don't know if you have any thoughts, but my inclination is to, try to identify what is the information that your audience is going to need to know that they wouldn't automatically know just, from general knowledge, right? Like Hoffman says to like write with the non-specialist in mind.
Right.
So if you're writing with a non-specialist in mind, what is the information from your literature review that is not something that that a non-specialist would know? That providing that background information that's really going to kind of set the stage so that you can then say, okay, and here's where I'm identifying this gap, and here's how I'm filling that gap. That probably leaves out a whole lot in your literature review. But again, that's the abstract isn't necessarily going to be a summary so much as a a concise look at the overall story of your paper or your dissertation or whatever project.
Maybe kind of like the final step in your lit review.
Yeah.
Is like where you kind of start in your abstract.
Yeah.
And I do think that also I think that there are different ways in which your research can like quote unquote fill the gap. And I think maybe thinking about like how your research is filling the gap may help inform your decisions for like what elements of your like lit review you want to emphasize the most in that sentence or two. Yeah.
That's a good point, right? If you're making like a methodological intervention, like you're doing a study with a new technology or you're working with a new population or then that would go in the abstract. Yeah, as opposed to some of the other more fine-grained stuff that you need for your paper. But if it's like the one contribution you're making, I think that's why that novelty framework thing is helpful for me too, thinking about that. Sorry, trailed off mumbling.
Well, it's kind of like maybe if you're doing it really briefly, like in just a few sentences, you kind of like the first half of the first sentence situates what you're doing within like this gigantic field, and the second half of the sentence like says the most relevant
Mm.
research that it fits within.
Yeah.
but-
I like thinking about that structurally too. It's like while X, you know,
Yeah.
also Y or something like those two clauses. That's good.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of sometimes we talk about like in scientific writing about like old to new,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like thinking about how even just at the sentence level, the first part of that sentence should always be the old information, the stuff that's like already known. And then you should end that sentence with the new information that's going to connect to the next sentence. And it's kind of like this chain of old to new, old to new, old to new.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think like, you know, the very start of that, the very start of the abstract should, you know, start with the old, say like, here's what's already known. Here's where I'm.
But really briefly,
Yeah.
somehow, magically.
Yeah.
Wild pale cystic nematodes have plagued Idaho potato farmers for, you know, since their introduction to crops and whatever.
Yeah.
Little has been done to successfully eradicate this horrible pest.
New information.
Yeah.
Well, hello. Hi, Spencer. This is Mercedes, and I would like to know if there is still writing tutoring at the writing center in the afternoon is still available for grad students, and are you there or somebody else?
Yeah, hey Mercedes, it's good to hear from you. Yeah, I mean, I guess that we can transition into talking about the schedule and stuff. I don't know if do you want to log in with
Sure.
student email? I'm gonna share my screen and show how to make an appointment, and then everybody else that's on the Zoom can, you know, also make appointments. But yes, Mercedes, to answer your question directly, I am still in the Writing Center along with Jason, and we're happy to work with you.
So what time is the schedule? I mean, I think it's helpful is after work because, you know, we go full time and it's complicated like this time. But I just wanted to jump in and ask if there is any time available at the library in the afternoon.
Not at the library, but we are on the third floor of ISUB of the
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
But yes, we do have availability. Let me go ahead and pull up the schedule so you can see when we're available.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
And can grad students go to the library writing center or only the one in ISUB?
They can all go to the library writing center as well.
Okay, so both, but the specific graduate writing support is more like it's going to be in the ISUB.
Yes.
But there are other writing tutors in the library.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's new this year, right?
It
Yes,
is.
being in the
Yeah.
library. Okay.
Hi, y'all. I'm Emma. I'm the interim director of the Writing Center here at the University of Idaho, and I am just logging in to our scheduling website so that you can see a little bit about how to make an appointment.
And how did you get to that? Sorry, maybe you totally showed them and I missed
So
it.
here's our Writing Center page at the University of Idaho. I work here. I go to this website every day. I navigate to it by Googling UIdaho Writing Center. That is the fastest way to get here. Once you're ready to make an appointment, just hit this big yellow make an appointment button, and that'll take you over to the login screen that you just watched me navigate. We have options for 3 different types of schedules. Graduate writing assistance is where you can get connected with Spencer and Jason. And this is writing support that is specifically for graduate students. And the benefit of that is that your tutor, your writing consultant, has an hour of time before your appointment to review the work that you send them ahead of time. This theoretically will help you to have a more sort of in-depth conversation about the complex and demanding work that so many of our grad students are doing. So that's the main difference with the graduate writing assistance schedule. Your tutor has some time to prepare, and they work exclusively with graduate students. I'll talk about our regular schedule in just a second. So here we have our graduate writing assistance schedule. And as you can see, any of the blank or white boxes are available times that you can book to make an appointment with either Spencer or Jason. And Mercedes, to answer your question, it looks like we've got some availability at 5 p.m. on Friday. We also have 5 p.m. on Mondays as well. Anything that's
And you
blacked
don't
out.
have, sorry, you don't have drop-ins, right? Is that correct?
We don't have drop-ins for the Graduate Writing Center service. However,
Okay, because yeah, I remember I think last semester they were offering some of drop-in. That's what I was wondering if there is one this
yeah,
semester.
we didn't have any drop-ins last semester, but this semester we do have drop-ins on our regular schedule, which is on the second floor of the main library. And we do have drop-ins on Monday, excuse me, usually on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can't sign up for those ahead of time. You just have to drop in and take your chances from 3 to 5 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on the second floor of the main library. We also have these evening appointments that are available in the library as well. We're open many days in the week until 8 p.m. or at least until 7 p.m. And I'm sure our regular tutors would be happy to work with anybody who schedules an appointment with them at that time. Our regular schedule is absolutely open to graduate students. In fact, many graduate students work as tutors on our regular schedule in the library. However, they do not have time to prepare for your appointments. You can't send them work ahead of time. And we also work with a lot of undergraduate students as well. But if that works best for your schedule, and if that's the vibe that you're channeling these days, then absolutely feel free to come on down to the library and yeah, come see about us. Graduate students are welcome to make appointments on either schedule. Okay.
Thank you guys so
I'm gonna
much.
hand this back.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming to the workshop. It was fun to prepare and think about abstracts, and hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you have any specific questions about abstracts or just about the Writing Center as you're working on your thesis or dissertation, or even just like an article for a class or something you're trying to publish, Jason and I would be happy to come and work with you. So yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.